Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Doomer Optimism podcast. We've got some new people today, both a new co-host and a new guest. Before we get to the guest, I want to introduce the co-host, Dave, aspiring Peasant on Twitter. And we're very excited to have him. We've been trying to get him on as a guest, but he's been pretty squirrely about it for some reason. But it's okay if we can get him on as a host at least. So welcome, Dave. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thanks, Jason. I honestly, I was just super excited to talk to both of you guys, all three of you. It's some of my favorite people on Twitter. So when I got the opportunity, I was like, I couldn't pass it up. But really, what I wanted to do was have Jeff's message get out there a lot more, because he says a lot of things that resonate pretty deeply with me, and I think with a lot of us. It comes from a completely different angle, and his perspective is, instead of coming from theoretical, is often coming from very literally boots on the ground, donkey hose on the ground. And so I just want to hear a lot more from Jeff. So Jeff, if you could do a quick intro and tell us about what you're doing right now and kind of your path there, especially like as it relates to your attitude towards maybe renewable energy and the reason why you are doing what you're doing. I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's a long road. What I'm doing right now is agroforestry and perennial food cropping with small amounts of vegetable gardening. And to the extent possible, I do 100% of my work with no imported fuels or fossil fuels. I use what I refer to as food energy, which is to say that the basic energy available prior to fossil fuel energy was what we ate and what we fed to animals. So the density of energy available to us through food is the energy source that I pursue. My focus is twofold. My oldest and longest focus is trying to heal the ground to improve the total life foundation on whatever ground I own. When I first started, I moved from the city to the country in 1984. I was 36, and I was born and raised in Kansas City. I'd never been anywhere else. I was central in Kansas City's hippie community throughout the 60s and 70s. I'm a Vietnam combat veteran, 100% disabled from wounds to my brain. And when I came out here, I didn't know anything. But what I knew I wanted to do, I bought 40 acres up near Rayville, Missouri. And my focus at that time was to try to increase wildlife on it. I took wildlife management training from the Missouri Conservation Department, courses they offered for free to the public, not a formal thing. And I began to manage that land that way. At that time, I didn't realize that the best for the wildlife and the best for the plants and the best for the biome and the best for humans were the same things. I believed, as many people believe today, that we stood athwart the health of the earth, that our humanity was in contradiction to the health of the earth, and that what we did as humans made the earth worse. I have come now to believe that we're supposed to be a keystone species, that our evolved purpose is to make the earth more productive, and that we have all the abilities to do that in our minds and in our bodies and in the bodies of our animal friends. And so back then, my focus was not on what I could use. And the years, oh man, it's been a long road. Somewhere after I'd been there about 2 or 3 years, when I moved there, I bought a tractor and, a little bit of tractor equipment, the stuff you do when you move from the city to the country. And 40 acres is a quarter-mile square. And to try to manage that by yourself, that's a lot of land. People don't, we have this high energy view of land where, like my neighbor's farming 3,000 acres. But he's got $150,000 in each one of his 10 different big machines. So I mean, it's a different world. If you try to do it without all that fossil energy, all of a sudden the land gets vastly bigger. And 40 acres was really big, and it was really a handful. So I have all these tractors, and I did all this stuff, and I I planted trees. I got trees and things from the Missouri Conservation Department. I planted all those. I worked on it. And somewhere along the line, I realized that we, the people of the modern world, had made a serious mistake when we adopted cars and tractors. And I still believe that. And so going to the information that was available to me, if it wasn't going to be cars and tractors, it was going to be draft horses. And so I started out with a team of old Amish broke draft horses that were being retired at the age of 12 because they couldn't work, 10-hour days in the field anymore. But I was a 35-year-old tradesman with a job in the city, commuting an hour and a half each way and working 8 hours up there and coming home. And I couldn't work these horses nearly long enough to make them tired. So I bought a team of draft horses. I bought, $2,000 worth of harness and $5,000 worth of machinery and started off. And I learned a lot through that. At that time, the only source of information for this kind of thing was a magazine called the Small Farmers Journal. It still exists. It's published by Lynn Miller in Oregon. And Lynn is a major advocate of draft horsepower, and he's a fine man, and I think the world of him. He's a year or two older than me. Back years ago, 30 years ago, we were friends, and I knew him rather well. I managed to offend him. I've managed to offend a lot of people over the years, and sadly, my friend Lynn is one of them. But I did that for about 6 years, and ultimately, I failed. It turned out to be more work and more knowledge than I could put on the ground and still work a full-time job in the city. I have no formal education beyond high school, and I spent my life as a tradesman. I was a telephone man. I was a computer network man. My last job was IT manager for a small rural hospital in Missouri. But I always made my living with my hands and my mind. You had to know what to do with your hands, but that's how I made my living. And there's not a lot of money in that. So, I didn't have a whole lot of spare cash to throw at the ground. I had, what I earned and making my farm payments and commuting. I figured out after 5 years of commuting that with my drive as it was, 5 years of commuting equaled exactly one full working year of looking out through the windshield, 2,060 hours. And so all the commuting and all the farming went together, and ultimately I failed with the draft horses. I was not able to manage my land that way, and I went through a long, bleak period, which I'm not going to go into with a lot of detail. But later, I married my second wife, who recently died, and I moved here to her farm. And then after a long time, I knew I had to get back to animals, but horses are too big, they're too fast, they're too strong, they cost too much, they're too flighty, they're too goofy. And I had an old donkey that had been born on my farm, and he'd been with me for years. So 3 or 4 years ago, I decided to train him how to work. And I got to where I and he knew more than his elderly self was able to do. So I got a new team of donkeys from a friend, 2 young females. And I started doing all my work with donkeys. Well, when you do agroforestry, you don't do any tillage. The two practices are contrary. There's nothing to till. I get 200 trees in the spring from the Missouri Conservation Department. That's not a plow something project. That's you go out with 50 or 60 or 80 trees and a shovel, and you go to where your decided spot is, and you go along and you plant one and you move, and you plant one and you move, and you plant one and you move. And I found out that there's literally no easier way in the world to do that than with a donkey on a cart. If you do it, say you're going to do it with a tractor. So you have to get on the tractor, drive up 10 feet, get off the tractor, stop it, turn it off, plant a tree, get on the tractor, drive up 10 feet, so forth. Or You can drive it out here, and then you can walk back and forth to the tractor, you know, and plant your trees. And either the whole time you're working, you're listening to it, or you're starting it and stopping it. Any way you shake it. You take a team of donkeys in a cart or a single donkey in a cart, and you don't ever have to get on. You don't ever have to get off. You can drive them from the ground. You can walk along with them. So you load all your trays and you load all your shovels and all your stuff on a cart, and you take 10 steps and you plant a tree, and you pick up the lines and you say walk up, and you take 10 steps and you plant a tree, and you pick up the lines and you walk up and you take 10 steps, you plant a tree, and it's just easy. So then I realized that everything I did here was easier with a team of donkeys on a cart. Everything was easier. It's not like I'm doing this the hard way to prove a point. It's like I'm doing this the easy way to have a good day. It's fun. It's easy. We go around here, but I was still mowing with fossil fuels. I was still baling hay with fossil fuels. I came to be just blindingly conscious of the energy consumed by my practices. To take a little aside here, we talk now commonly about fossil fuels. People say we need to use less fossil fuels. We need to stop using fossil fuels. We need to get away from the fossil. The fossil fuels are only what enables our actions. We don't have another way to do these actions. We can't get away from fossil fuels and do the actions that we're powering with fossil fuels, because in spite of what we've been told, we don't know any other way to do them. The other things don't exist. They haven't been made. They haven't been installed. They're big. It's going to take a long time. And so we actually, right now today, we have two choices. One is burn fossil fuels to do the things we do. And the other is not do the things we do, or do less of the things we do. So I came to be increasingly aware of the energy demands of the tasks I did. And if you're going to go out here and make hay, my donkeys run on hay. Horses run on hay and grain, but donkeys are the lowest energy requirement or the highest energy efficiency of any power source known to humankind, save for our own bodies.
Is that unleaded hay?
Yeah, that is unleaded hay. Okay. To the extent of my ability, my neighbors are still out here with their tractors, so I'm not sure what's blowing across here, but I'm not having. But still, you go out with a tractor and you mow it, and then hay has to be raked. Once you mow it, it has to lay on the ground and it has to dry, and then it has to be raked into what's called windrows, because otherwise it covers every square foot of your whole field and you can't gather it easily. So you have to break it up into these stripes, piles, and then you go through and you gather it up that way. So I would mow my hay and then I would rake it, and that was the mowing came with the tractor, and then the raking came with the tractor, and then I'd go through with another tractor, the biggest tractor we own, and a baler, and I would bale it all up, and then I'd go out there with the donkeys and gather it up. Well, I've already got a humongous amount of petroleum in that hay, and so I'm feeding my donkeys hay, and I can pat myself on the back. Hey, look, I'm running my donkeys on they don't emit, but I've got a humongous amount of petroleum in that hay. So then you start to figure, well, okay, what am I really doing here? So then I decided, well, I really don't need to bale it. I mean, the only reason hay is baled is to make it smaller, so you can get more tons in a barn. It doesn't have anything to do with its edibility or its nutrient density or its storability. It's just strictly a matter of you apply all that energy into the hay to make the hay smaller. And then you tie it up with strings so it stays smaller. And when you cut the strings, it goes boing, and that's the energy that's actually petroleum energy that you have put in the hay that's making the bale go boing. Okay, that petroleum energy was stored in there all this time as compressed gas. And so you start to be aware of all the energy that you use. So now I don't bale, and then that turns out to be easier. I'm an old fart, I'm kind of broken down. And you can set a baler to how tight it compresses the hay and how long it makes it before it ties it. That's the two primary adjustments in a square baler. And so the smallest I can set my old John Deere baler is about a 40-pound bale. So that means every time I lift, I have to lift 40 pounds. I'm 74 years old. And you're talking about, lifting 100, 120 bales a day. So that's 120 40-pound lifts at one end. And then you go to the barn and it's 120 40-pound lifts to get them off the trailer. And then it's 120 40-pound lifts to carry them inside the barn. And then it's 120 40-pound lifts to stack them. Right. So, I've done that. Well, like I said, when I moved out here, I was in my 30s. I could do this all day. But 40 pounds has gained weight considerably over the last quarter century or so. And so I started hauling loose hay. Well, you pick it up by the forkful, and a forkful weighs, depending on how you're loading it and how good you are with a pitchfork, anywhere from 12 to 25 pounds. So I can go around the field and I can actually gather up a ton of hay quicker with a pitchfork than I can with square bales. Because it's just lift, poke, lift, poke, lift, poke, and it's about the same speed you walk. It's not that heavy. It's not that hard. And my old body can do this all day. So I can gather loose hay and I can do it all day. So I've left out one major, because of all the things I did with hay at that time, the number one energy demand was baling, compressing it and cutting it. Now, most people today use the big bales. And the reason for the big bales is because that way we don't have to put any human strength in it. None. All the energy comes out of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels cut it, fossil fuels bale it. Your tractor picks it up and carries it. You drive it back and forth with your fossil. By the time you're done, 100% of the energy that is in your hay is fossil fuel energy. You don't have any body energy at all, no human energy, no animal energy. And then you take that and you feed it to your animals. Well, the way you feed big bales is you put one out there and you leave it there until the animals eat it all. And then you put out another one and you leave it out there until the animals eat it all. And now cattle are the most dangerous thing on the farm, because they're all as wild as deer and they weigh 1,500 pounds. And they've never met you. They don't know their food comes from you. That machine comes out here and it goes plonk, and then there's something for them to eat all week. They see the machine coming, they run to it. They see you coming, they run away from it. So I feed my work stock every day, twice a day, by hand, personally. They know where the food comes from. My donkeys know where the food comes from. When they see me coming, they know that that's a good thing. And so you can't have successful results with work stock if you use big bales, because you need to be with them all the time. My cattle are tame. I can go out to my cow and pet her on the forehead. I can go out to my cow with a pocket full of alfalfa cubes and feed them to her all afternoon, because I feed her personally too. So I've got a friend on Twitter who says it all starts with the mealtime, and she's right, But anyway, back to the energy deal. So now my objective is, I just bought a mower that I can pull with my donkeys. When I had my draft horses, I used to mow with them. But draft horses are big and strong. And when I bought them, I bought a 7-foot John Deere hay mower. And I could go out with my draft horses and I could mow a 7-foot wide swath of hay between work and dark. And I'd have enough hay that it would be all I could carry on Saturday, Well, donkeys aren't as big as draft horses. They're more energy efficient, but they get that way two ways. One is by moving more slowly, because the energy demand of any job is the weight times the speed times the distance. So you take a team of draft horses. My draft horses weighed 1,500 pounds apiece. Okay, you take a team of draft horses, you hook them to a 14-inch bottom plow, and they walk it at 4 miles an hour. And the amount of energy required to turn that furrow is provided by both their strength and their speed. Well, if you wanted to plow that same thing, which, as I said, I don't, but if you did with a team of donkeys, you'd have to go with about an 8-inch plow, and they'd walk at 2.5 miles an hour. So you would move less mass. You'd be using the same distance, but you would be doing it at less speed. So 2 out of the 3 measurements would be reduced, or you'd be doing it at more time. 2 out of your 3 measurements would be reduced, so your energy demand is less, even though at the end the job's the same. So now I'm out here, okay, this mower I bought from my donkeys was designed by its manufacturer as a 1-horse mower to be pulled by 1 draft horse or big light draft, you know, a fjord or something. And I called the guy up. He's an Amish guy out in Pennsylvania. And I called him up and said, you know, could you make one of those for 2 donkeys? Put a team tongue on it instead of shafts on it, and set it up for 2 donkeys. And he said, sure, he could. So it's in shipment. It's on its way here now. I'll have a donkey-drawn hay mower this summer. So that takes one of my energy passes out. Go on, Dave.
Jeff, yeah, well, actually, I have a handful of questions, but one of them is, did they change the gearing so that it would still effectively cut at 2.5 instead of 4?
Nope, because it cuts so many Snickers that you know how a sickle bar mower works? A sickle bar mower is like scissors. Okay, it's like a whole bunch of pairs of scissors side by side on a knife. Okay, what you actually have is you have 2 knives, 2 long blades, 4 feet long in this case, with knives about 2 inches wide on them. Okay, and they go back and forth, and so the knives are sliding in opposite directions. In an old-fashioned mower, part of your knives, half your knives move and half your knives are stationary. But as the knives move, it creates the same cutting force as, well, you've seen a hedge trimmer that's got all that. It's like that. It's just exactly like that, only it's long and lays on the ground. Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So the knives are going back and forth. Okay. We'll take a hedge trimmer in your mind's eye, and let's say that you set it that every time you moved it forward a foot, it would go back and forth so many times. Well, in that foot, the number of branches you plan to cut doesn't change. So the slower you approach it, it's still going back and forth the same number of times per branch. So you get the same cutting effect per branch. I've got a sickle mower on a little John Deere diesel tractor out here, and that's what I was mowing hay with. And so what I did for experimentation with this was I went out with my little John Deere and I moved my throttle all the way down to just barely above an idle. I put it in the slowest gear, and I said, okay, now we're going to move.
It still works.
Still works. We're going to move very slowly. But what happens is the knife is driven by the wheels. Okay, as the wheels roll, the knife turns. The knife goes back and forth. It's what's called ground driven. There's just a gear between the wheels and the knife. Okay, so the faster you cover the ground, the faster the knife moves, the more blades of grass it encounters per step. The slower you cover the ground, the slower the knife moves, but the fewer blades of grass it encounters per step. So your knife move per blade of grass doesn't change any.
So now, let's say, so Jason, how much land do you have? What's your acreage? I know you got that beautiful field.
Yeah, I'm on 5 acres.
Okay.
And it seems a lot to me. But I don't have any machinery or any large livestock yet.
Now, Jeff, if Jason were to say, like, actually, this sounds really interesting, I want to start working my land with a donkey, how would he start? Like, where would he start? How would he learn? And like, is 5 acres, like, what's the land per animal ratio that you would need, assuming healthy grassland?
Your average African farm is between 3 and 5 acres and powered by donkeys. There's all your answers right there. The land produces plenty. I'm cutting my annual hay off 1.5 acres.
Okay, there you go. And you're feeding three donks plus cows?
My old cow doesn't eat hay except when I feed it to her because I want to. She's just an old pasture pet. When my wife was alive, and when we were younger, we had a lot of animals. We used to have 100. She used to have 100 Angora goats on this farm and produced mohair for market. And that was before we were married, but I knew her for years and years and years before we married. And in fact, I helped her with her goats when she had them. How did I get into that? I don't know. I lost my place. What did you ask me? How would you get? what I would do if I wanted to start with donkeys, in fact, this is what I did do. The first thing you want to do is get one, okay? And then you want to teach it to do stuff for you. You know, like when I got my current team, they were wild. One of them was almost as wild as a deer. My friend got her off a farm where she had been born out in a field and had never been handled by a human in her entire 3 years of life. She was literally a completely feral donkey, as if you got one out of the West, you know, off the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and her daughter, the other one I have is my feral one's daughter. So the first thing you do is you teach them to lead with a lead rope, and you do everything with goodies. You know, you walk out there with goodies, and you hand your donkeys a goodie, and you do that every day for a week. And then you walk out there with a halter in your hand, and you hold the halter up, and you hold the goodie on this side of it, and the donkey has to stick their nose through the halter to get the goodie.
And donkey goodies are alfalfa cubes?
But no, those are too rich. My donkey goodies or any kind of horse treat will work, but I use beet pulp pellets is my primary donkey goodie. They're about the size of an inch of a wooden pencil. They're about the diameter of a regular old-fashioned wooden pencil, and they come in a bag between a half an inch long and 3/4, 2 inches, maybe, you know. And they're just when they make beet sugar, okay, they take the sugar beets, they press all the sugar out of them.
This is the fiber that's left over.
And this is the fiber that's left over.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. So you're leading them. You're giving them beet treats.
Right. So you get them to where they'll lead. You get them to where they'll stand. You get them to where they'll do everything for you, and then you start putting stuff on them. You know, I made all my harness, and I made it all by putting straps on my donkeys and putting safety pins in them to mark where things needed to be. Now, I had an advantage here. I used to work draft horses. I know every strap in a work harness. I know why it's there. I know what it does. I know how strong it has to be to function because I had that experience. If you don't have that experience, you almost have to find somebody who will teach you, but you can come pretty close by buying one of Lynn Miller's draft horse books, workhorse handbooks. Lynn Miller is, once again, he's the guy who publishes the Small Farmers Journal. And everything that you can do with a horse, you can do with a donkey, only the scale's smaller, okay? So my draft horse, my donkey harness is just exactly, has all the exact same parts as my draft horse harness had, only they're lighter weight and smaller. That's the only difference. So by the time I had all my harness made, I started out with Missy because that's my older one, the mother. The daughter, when I bought him, was not mature enough yet to begin to work. Equines have to mature, or the equines are born like their forelegs look like one bone, but it's actually 3 bones that lay side by side. And when they're born, they're separate bones. And this is all equines: zebras, donkeys, horses, name one. Okay, and as they mature, those bones fuse into one bone. And if you work them too young, you can cause those bones to move relative to one another in the leg, and the fusion process will not occur. So you've destroyed that animal's health forever. It can never get well.
How long do they have to mature before they can actually work?
With a horse, you need them to be 3. With a donkey, you need them to be 4. Donkeys live longer and mature slower. So I didn't start Clara, my little one, till this year, because this is her year of turning 4. But Missy was already 3 when she was first caught by a human. And so when I got her was a year later. My friend who caught her is an equine professional, but she doesn't mostly do donkeys. She mostly does big horses. But she took her home and she did the leading part. She taught her to put on a halter. She taught her to walk on a lead rope. She taught her to be mannerly. My friend's a farrier by trade, so needless to say, she taught her to stand and have her feet properly cared for and things like this. So when I got her, she knew all that stuff. So all I had to do was move forward from there. So I start putting stuff on them, and then you start leading them around, and then you want them to pull something. Well, that's going to scare them because they're prey animals. Things chase them to eat them. If something follows them when they walk, it's chasing them, they're going to run from it. So what you need to do is get yourself in a little space. And like what I did was I took my harness that I'd made, and there's a tool or a part called a single tree or whiffle tree that goes between the harness and the pull load. It's just a stick that goes sideways. And I hooked a log chain to it, put her in a barnyard, and I start to lead her with a log chain. Well, I lead her one step and she wants to run, but I stop her immediately. One step, whoa. One step, whoa. Now we're going to do 2 steps, whoa. And every time she whoas, it's a goodie. I mean, I don't go out there without a bag of goodies on in my pants. I used to put them in my pocket, but they really are not that good on the washing machine. So I got an external wear that I don't have
the bead stains coming out of your pockets look like you're just dripping blood.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, no, they're not red. By the time they're beet pulp, they've lost all their color. But they're like crunched up Wheaties, only kind of a grayish green color. And you wash them and they just expand wildly. So now you've got all these mushy big things in your lint trap, and it's so anyway. But then you get them to pull something, and then you teach them that when they pull it, the way to make it stop chasing them is stop. Right? They stop, it stops. The chase is over. So it doesn't take too long for them to figure that out. They're really smart. And so then you pull them longer. And I mean, I worked my donkeys a long time before I ever put lines on them, reins on them, drove them from behind. I did everything strictly with a lead rope. I worked them with a lead rope on a cart. Once I got my donkeys trained to work on a cart, I'm still towing them, because you don't have to walk to ride. You can walk. I do almost all my farming here walking. When I started raising donkeys, I weighed 220 pounds. I'm 5'8". 3 years of working donkeys and no other change, I weigh 185.
It's donkey cardio fit.
That's it.
I love it.
And you have to completely redesign your time frame. Jason, you said you got 5 acres. You get yourself a team of donkeys and you can stay busy the whole rest of your life on 5 acres. You'll never run out of space. If we want to make, we all talk about there being too many people, or too many people, or too many people, or too many people. Well, if we didn't all have to hog up 40, 60, 80, 100, 1,000, 3,000 acres apiece, there'd be a lot more room in the first place. And in the second place, if we do our job properly as humans on Earth, every place we go, the carrying capacity to support humans goes up.
Jeff, that reminds me. You said you have a thing about a no-mow zone and your approach to stewardship. It seems like a perfect chance to talk about that.
Yeah, that's really something. And I got to thinking about this the other night when I was listening to a Doomer Optimism podcast, and somebody had just gone to the country. She'd never been there before, and she was just thrilled to death. She went out in her backyard and she didn't mow it, and it grew all up in wildflowers, and the butterflies came, and she was thrilled to death. And when they asked her, to tell people something to do, she said, "Never mow your land again." When I bought my place up by Rayville, it was yard all the way to the road. It's a gravel road. I don't live on any pavement. I don't like pavement. Well, everybody goes fast on pavement, and they run over your dogs, they run over your cats, and I'm running back and forth across the road. My property's on both sides of the road, and I'm running back and forth across the road on a donkey cart, and I don't want to be out there and people going, "Bah!" So anyway, but it was grass all the way out to the road, and I walked this path, but about halfway between the house and the road, and I said, beyond this point, I will never mow. This is 1984. Now,
and you said this. What was your motivation there? Just let it be wild.
Yes, let it be wild.
Okay, all right.
When I bought that property, once again, going back to my original introduction, my focus was increase wildlife. That was my original focus, increase wildlife. And so I was going to let this be wild. And plus also, I don't like to be right up in people's faces. I like to be left alone. And so I figured it would grow up some
Give you a buffer.
Yeah, a screen, for me to live behind and not be so obvious. That's the most worthless place I own. The land needs us to care for it. It doesn't produce anything of value for me. It doesn't produce anything of value for anything else. It's all fallen down sticks and vines and poison ivy and crap and entangled trees, and it's just a dead zone. It's going to take 2 or 3 people 2 or 3 weeks to turn that into anything that's even worth having on your land.
Yeah.
Just not mowing it for almost 40 years.
We made kind of that mistake the first year where we were kind of like, oh, we want to let the part we're not using go wild, and we basically went a whole year. And the next year, our neighbors have cows and hay, and they were haying, and we were like, can you hay this? Because we had wised up that okay, the land is not moving in a useful direction, not really useful for wildlife, not really useful for us. So we had them hay it with their big machines, and took a little bit for our own use. But yeah, I mean that's something that I think some people don't understand about this idea of like regeneration versus the idea of restoration, of like, oh, if we just like let nature go back to where it was, it'll be Garden of Eden again. And well, humans have been around for a long time. They've been managing the landscapes for a long time, in some cases much more sustainably than others. And so now I'm like, well, okay, we'll mow it in the meantime, but eventually I want to get rotational grazing going, to basically mow as well, but also build up topsoil and provide things for us as well for our livelihood.
Right. Well, and it goes beyond that. You can, like my wife died on December 23rd of last year, and we'd been married for 17 years, and we had worked farms together for almost 30, and on both farms. But when her previous husband left, clear back in the 90s, she had people hay this. She owns 28 acres, and that's where I live. On my other 40, I still own, and it's another story. I'll get into it maybe if it becomes an opportunity.
We'll get there.
But she had people just hay this every year, and she had horses, and she had sheep, and she had goats, and she had a donkey or two, and the cattle have been here on and off all these years, and they always hayed it with big bales. She was like me. She came from the city. She came from Grand Forks, North Dakota, but we're both city people. We come out here to the country, and we didn't know anything. It's been a long, steep learning process. But if you just hay it and hay it and hay it and hay it, it gets poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer. It doesn't matter what you're taking off. If you're planting corn every year and harvesting corn, the land gets poorer. Everybody knows that. If you're planting wheat every year and you harvest wheat, the land gets poorer. Everybody knows that. What we don't know is if you just harvest off the hay every year, the land still gets poorer. You're taking the same tons of nutrient off the land every year. Yeah. And so what I have done here on this 17 on this 28 since I moved here in 2004, is anything we don't need for hay, I wait until it gets between knee and waist high, and then I mow it and I leave that. Mm. And 17 years of that has drastically increased the productivity of this land. I haven't added anything else except what grew off of it. Mm. I've just added back its own production. And like we got a little creek down here that used to dry up every summer. It's a seasonal creek. We're way up in the uplands, so that's not, surprising. But just by doing this and one or two other small things, I've got it to where most summers it never dries up at all. Because
what are the other two things?
Keyline swales and expanding the naturally growing riparian woods. And then everything that falls down dead in the woods, I use limbs, branches, prunings, and deadfall in the creek to slow the water, to absorb energy out of the water. When energy is absorbed, then the water can't carry as much soil anymore because it's the energy in the water that enables it to carry silt. So when you absorb energy out of the water, the silt falls out.
So basically you're a beaver. Yeah,
except I'm not as good as they are.
Not as busy.
management things down here in the creek, and I've been doing it now for 12 years, is to try to increase its attractiveness to beavers. I know for sure there's beavers in this watershed. I know this for sure. I could take you and point at them for you. I know all my watersheds. I know where my creek goes into that creek, and I know where that creek goes into the next creek, and I could walk you from here to the Missouri River and never leave the water, and easily, and it'd be about a 30-mile walk, about 17 miles overland, and there's beavers in this watershed. So if I can make this creek tempting enough, if I can get enough willows down there, if I can get enough permanent water down there, if I can get enough riffles and furrows, or pools and rills down there, then I'll get beavers. They'll come in one spring when they're in there on their when the young of the year or young of the previous year are chased out by their parents. They go upstream looking for a place to live. And if I modify this creek well enough with my part, then I'll get beavers, and that's the objective. Okay, that's really the objective, because look at what beavers do. When beavers come into a place, the first thing they do is they start killing trees, and people go crazy. Oh my God, the beavers are killing my trees. Okay, I'm planting trees down there like there's no tomorrow, and there's not one of them the beavers can't have. They can have the chestnuts, they can have the oaks, they can have the hickory nuts, they can have the pawpaws. I don't care. Beavers want to have my trees, they can have them. But when a beaver comes in, the first thing it does is start killing trees. Okay, so like when a human comes in, the first thing they do is start screwing up the environment, okay? But the longer the beavers live there, the more other things can live around them, period. Beavers increase the carrying capacity of a given spot of creek front and land by their actions.
Beavers are infrastructure, man.
Right, we're supposed to do that. That's our job here as humans, is to enhance this land's ability to produce for us. And that, you know, like the Native Americans, their term for wild land was our term for wasteland. Unmanaged land is not that beneficial. I mean, it needs to be managed by something. It needs to be managed by beavers, or it needs to be managed by humans, or it needs to be managed by mastodons. Something needs to manage the land. Everything I do around here, I discourage plants that I don't like things that have lots of thorns on them, or poison ivy. I just hate poison ivy. But I don't poison them, I just discourage them. And I encourage things I do like, which is things that make food for me, things that make pollen and liquid sugar. I can't think of the word. I'm brain
Nectar.
Yeah, that's it. For the bees, things that make homes for the birds. I encourage plants that do things I like, and I discourage plants that do things I don't like. But I use very little poison. I do use a little. When I cut down a tree that's in a place where I really don't need to be fighting with its regrowth for the rest of my life, I use a commercial toxin called Tordon on the stump. And I'll use it on, I've got poison ivies around here that the root vine's almost as big as my wrist. And I'll use it on one of those. And so you discourage things that are not beneficial to you, and you encourage things that are beneficial to you, and you do it at the smallest scale that you can see improvement, because it's more important what you get to grow there than getting rid of your opponent. Like right now, I got 2 lots down here that are just completely full of honey locust, which is an obnoxious thorn tree. The thorns are literally bigger than my finger. And
good firewood, though.
It's tolerable, but I'm not heating with wood anymore. That's another thing that went its way when I got old. I heated with wood till I was about 60. And now I got a little, my house is tiny. That little tiny stove on the wall there, that's all I got for heat. It's a little propane wall heater. My house is 368 square feet. Anyway, I lost my place. Where where was I? Can you get me back there? I've lost.
Yeah,
my
yeah.
place.
We were talking about discourage the fact that beaver. You're basically like a beaver, encouraging growing the carrying capacity of your land through the things that you're doing.
But like, for instance, my work cart that I use for my donkeys, the tongue on that cart used to be a thorn tree. So I got, I'm making a cart. I need a tongue. A tongue is the thing that sticks out in front of one, and it's how work stock. You see a cart or a wagon, like picture one on TV, the stagecoach, and there's a pole that comes out between the animals to the fronts of the animals, and it hangs off their neck, and then there's straps that go back from the animals to back behind their haunches. Okay, the straps that go back are what the animals pull the cart with, but they when the cart tries to roll up on them, the pole goes up to the front of them, and it pulls on an arrangement of straps that winds up behind their behind on a thing called a britchin. So the pole is a critical part of the machine. It's how you stop it. It's how you go downhill without the machine running over your donkeys. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I had to have a pole. So I just go down there in the thorn forest, and I look around till I see one that's about the right size, and I cut it off. Bring it up here and let it dry for a couple of weeks, and finished up building my cart. So I don't take things off the ground for no reason. One of my former wives, or ex-wives, late wives, rules of living. She used to call it the 11th commandment. Since I don't adhere to that same first 10th rule, I use it differently. But she called it the 11th commandment, and that was "Thou shalt not waste." And that is very important to us here. So I don't go down here and cut stuff down and waste it. If I cut something down, the odds are I'll find a use for it. And if I cut something down, the odds are it's because I need the place it's standing in for something that I want to grow that's more beneficial to me. So the whole thing, I had never heard of permaculture when I started this, but basically the permaculture principles, the 12 principles, are about as good as you can get for a design framework. And use small and slow solutions, do the least you can to get a positive benefit, obtain a yield, catch and store energy. So all the things I do around here are based on those principles. I've got 28 acres here. I don't think I can manage the whole 28 with donkeys. When my wife died, she and I didn't live in the same house. This was our choice before we married. We were already old canshankers, old people when we got married. So our choice when we got married was to have two separate houses. And this farm that she owned had two houses on it. One she lived in and one that was not occupied, and that's where I live now. She and I restored it and made it comfortable for me. So when she died, she gave her house to a young couple, to a young woman. And they're going to move here. They're in the process of working to move here. They'll be here after the school year, and they have two children who are in school. So they'll be moving in out here. So I'll have a young couple on the farm with me. I doubt that even with all of us that we can do it all with donkeys. 28 acres is too big for one family with donkeys. 28 acres, you could manage 28 acres as a crop farm. For one family with draft horses, you could manage 40 for one family with draft horses, because draft horses are big and powerful, and crops are, relatively speaking, space wasters. I mean, row crops are space wasters. You go through, you'd say you take a 10-acre field and you simplify it till it doesn't produce anything but corn. You get every possible thing it could produce but corn off of it. And then you take a 12-month year and you capture solar energy for 4 months of that 12-month year, and you harvest your corn, and you waste the rest of the ground, you waste the rest of the year's sunlight, you waste the rest of the year's rain. So row crops are inherently wasteful.
Jeff, I think this is a good segue I want to segue a little bit, if you don't mind,
I don't mind.
to, you're well known on Twitter for having these epic threads about climate change and energy, and just what you said there about kind of the wasteful row crops. Well, if it's wasteful, why do we do it? Well, because we have cheap fossil energy, we optimize labor productivity instead of like resource productivity. We're able to do that because we're living high on the hog with this energy source that's killing us, climate-wise, and it's eventually going to run out. Do you want to talk a little bit about how how we should respond to climate change and how it's great and mainstream?
I do want to talk about that. Energy. I said way back at the beginning that energy is a central part of my focus of everything. What we do with energy. Well, let me back up just a little. You talked about the corn and the row and the fossil fuel, okay? But we started with the row crops a long time before we got to the fossil fuel. We started with the row crops probably based on the dawn of everything. My understandings from it, we started on row crops probably before we even had work stock, when we were doing it all with our bodies. But also, we probably started on row crops in flood zones. So the flood rose up, it drowned out all the plants, it went back away, there's all that bare dirt, and annual grasses just love bare dirt. And all the grains we eat are annual grasses. We don't call them that, but that's what they are. Corn's grass, wheat's grass, barley's grass. The beans and stuff are legumes, but all the regular grains are all annual grasses, and annual grasses like bare dirt. So we started that down there, and then we thought, well, we can get this same fast rush of one crop that we can store and haul and feed ourselves on the hills if we just go up there with sticks and tear off all the soil, or tear off everything that's growing there. So eventually we got to where we are, but it all has to do with simplification. If all you're going to eat is one thing, you're going to eat wheat all year, then you can get a lot of wheat out of a relatively small area. It stores easily.
Easy to tax.
Huh?
It's very easy to tax.
I still didn't.
Right, it's very easy to tax. You can just the quantity. You can say, all right, this number of bushels, we've taken 5%.
Right.
Easy.
Half, whatever. Right. But the kind of farming that I do, as it matures, which it's very young now, my operation has all changed over the course of the last 5 years because I'm still learning things. A lot of what I'm telling you now, I'm still learning. I'm still deciding. I'm still realizing. It's not like I learned all this at 35 and I got it now. But I'm going to have hazelnuts. I'm going to have chestnuts. I'm going to have hickory nuts. I'm going to have pawpaws. I'm going to have persimmons. I'm going to have lots of elderberry. I have lots of mulberry. We had very successful mulberry yields here. But that's all different, and you have to manage each one in a different way. So somebody has to make mulberry preserves. Somebody has to make elderberry jelly or wine. Somebody has to pick up all these nuts when they are ripe, and then pick up all those other nuts when they're ripe. And so it becomes a year-round thing where you always have something to do, and you never have a whole lot stocked up. So you never have that feeling of, okay, I got my whole year's supply, I can kick back. It's like you're pretty much always on duty. You always have to take care of tomorrow, today, some way or other. And it's just a personal quirk that works for me. Like I heated for wood for 45 years. And you take most people who heat with wood, and I mean exclusively, I had nothing else. That was fine. When the lights went out, we cooked on a wood stove too. But you go out, and, these guys heat with wood. Now, I've got an Amish friend, and they heat with wood. He's got 2 years of wood in his wood shed. He's got next year's already in there drying. I usually was about 3 weeks ahead. Year round, The whole 40 years, I was about 3 weeks ahead. I got about 3 weeks worth of wood out there someplace. And I'm going to go out here every place I go. I'm driving around and I see somebody's got a dead elm tree standing in their front yard. And I stop and I go up and I knock on their door and I say, I'll take that tree for nothing. I'll just cut it down and haul it off. Won't charge you a penny. And they say, fine. So I cut their tree down and haul it off and go heat my house with it. And I'm like 3 weeks ahead all the rest of my life. And I'm still there. I've got about 3 weeks worth of whatever. And if I quit working, I'll die, but I'm not planning to. So, but you don't have that. Like 1 year when I had my draft horses, I grew on about a quarter acre, maybe 3/8. I grew a whole year's supply of bread. I didn't have, the only fossil fuel we had in that bread was what baked it, what turned it into bread from dough. I plowed the ground with my draft horses. I disced the ground with my draft horses. I went out there with a shoulder-borne hand cranked broadcaster. I broadcast the wheat seed into it. Went back in one more time with my draft horses and a spike tooth harrow and harrowed it down. Let it grow, wheat, weeds, and all. Didn't care about it. Go on.
Jeff, how does this I want to get back to Jason's question because I think it's really, really important, and it's at the core of the thing that you write most about, the climate change. Like how does your way of life relate to your climate change?
We've got to quit killing the world. We know absolutely for sure that what maintained that 280 parts per billion for 10,000 years was the biome, the biosphere. Photosynthesis. We know absolutely for sure that nothing has ever removed any significant amount of carbon from the atmosphere in 7 billion years of geological history, except photosynthesis. Until photosynthesis came along, the atmosphere had all that carbon in it, and the photosynthesis came along and it started extracting it. We know this for sure. This is a fact. Okay. Everything we do, we're spewing CO2 out on one hand, and we see that. But every single step we take, we're cutting down more photosynthesis. And that's the only thing we've got to take that CO2 back out of the air. We have nothing else. Nothing ever has and nothing ever will remove significant quantities of CO2 from the atmosphere except photosynthesis. Every living thing, including you and me, is roughly 50% atmospheric carbon. And the way the atmospheric carbon got into me was photosynthesis, put it in a plant, and either I ate the plant or an animal ate the plant and I ate the animal, or the plant died and a mushroom ate the plant and I ate the mushroom. Some way or other, all that carbon came out of the air through photosynthesis into every living thing on this earth, period. There is no dispute of that. Now, there's also no dispute that we have killed the vast majority of all the non-human biosphere. Now, yeah, we've got lots of tons of cattle out there, and they're made out of 50% atmospheric carbon. So, yes, we could have made it worse, but not much. Okay? So, what we do with our energy is a double-edged sword, and we kill something whichever way we swing it. When we swing it from the right to the left, we're burning that energy, we're burning those fuels, and the CO2 is going up into the atmosphere. And when we swing it from the left to the right, we're bulldozing more plants. We're better off with ragweed, poison ivy than we are with concrete. Ragweed and poison ivy are still taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. In fact, I got poison ivy around here that the leaves, individual leaflets, are as big as my hand. When I was 25, an individual leaflet in poison ivy was about that big. The whole difference is atmospheric carbon. We know for sure that different plants have different abilities to uptake the excess carbon. This is another thing that's been found in research because, some of them say, well, carbon's good, it's a fertilizer, we'll get better yields. Well, some things like it and some things don't. Two things that really like it are giant ragweed and poison ivy. But anyway, so what we need to do is we need to reduce our energy throughput in a systematic way that enables us to reduce our destruction of the biosphere to the point where we have slowed down enough that we can begin to enhance our biosphere. Okay, I've spent almost 40 years out here enhancing the biosphere, but the full 40 years, the biosphere of Ray County has gotten worse because we have more concrete, we have more Walmarts, we have more roads, we have more parking lots, and that's all built where there used to be biosphere. Okay, so my efforts have been outnumbered by 1,000 by the efforts of the people with the cement trucks and the pavers. So what we need to do is we need to slow from where we are now. Okay, to back up again a little. If you look at society in terms of energy, then just as a for instance, all the moving cars in the United States right now, I don't know how many there are across the whole country, but there are some thousands to millions of cars right now going a mile a minute. And all of that speed is kinetic energy. All of that kinetic energy was formerly chemical energy. Prior to that, it was solar energy. Okay, the sun shined on the photosynthetic cells, which took hydrogen from water, bound it with the carbon into sugars, let the oxygen from the water out. We know about that whole process. Okay, so then that became chemical energy. Sugars, anything when the photosynthetic process binds the sunlight, the carbon and the hydrogen together, there is chemical energy locked up in the molecule process of making that. So what we do is we add external energy, heat, to set that molecule on fire, and it burns, and the chemical energy bound in it becomes heat energy, which we run through a heat engine, which we turn into motion, which is kinetic energy. So now our whole society has currently, at this moment, embedded in it this almost unimaginable quantity of kinetic energy as motion, as heat. What we're doing right now, this is kinetic energy of the motion of electrons, of the motion of waveforms as they go across the continent. I'm sitting here with no wires, to my phone, and yet we're talking. This is all kinetic energy. And if you take and think for a minute, if you're out for a walk and you walk into a wall, it's not very painful and you go, oops. But if you're out for a run and you run into the wall, it hurts a lot. Why? Energy. Your body had to absorb your kinetic energy in a different form as impact energy. Everything that ever happens anywhere happens because of energy moving and converting between forms. Without energy, nothing ever moves. We know that. That's real simple. Okay, so we have so much kinetic energy in our society now that if it came to a halt all at once, it would be like running into a wall times 1,000. If we lose all this kinetic energy overnight, let's say that tomorrow Russia attacks Ukraine, and within 2 weeks the global petroleum distribution machine is down because we started bombing oil tankers. Okay, if the global energy distribution machine goes down, that means all the electricity goes down, because we think electricity is magic, but actually electricity was all fossil fuel energy too, almost all of it, and we just burned it and we got motion. We couldn't see the motion from where we were, so we thought it was clean, but it's all still the same thing. If that machine breaks, I think we'd see probably 5 or 6 billion people die worldwide of the current almost 8. And I'm not sure, because in parts of the world they're not as reliant on energy as we are. We hear if that machine goes down, like everybody in the desert Southwest dies before they can get to the next drink of water. only high energy provides drinking water in Las Vegas and Phoenix, and without the high energy, those people got nothing to drink. So we have so much energy embedded in our society, embedded in our machine, that what we need to do is gradually dissipate the energy back into the outer system. And the way you do that is by slowing.
Collapse now and avoid the rush, right?
No, we can avoid the collapse. I've done this deal. You've probably read it. Most people that follow me on Twitter have. Let's say we really wanted to fix climate change. Let's say we really cared. We really wanted to fix it. Okay. We got two things we got to do. One is we have to restore the entire global ecosystem, every square foot of it, as far as we possibly can. Now, lots of it's extinct, so we can't get that part back. But
managed as a keystone species by us, also giving us yield so that we can survive. I'm just
correct. That's exactly correct. We do that exactly. And the way you do that is you start to scrape off the excess energy. So you start to slow. If you went around the United States and you put up, you said, okay, tomorrow everybody who goes over the speed limit gets a ticket. Everybody, without exception. $500. Not 50, 500, okay? Nobody goes over the speed limit anywhere in the whole country. Next year, you drop it another 5 miles an hour below the speed limit. In 10 years, at 5 miles a year, you have an entire global society where nothing goes faster than a trotting horse. And never in that whole time was there this big disaster where there's no food available and no water available and nothing can happen. It takes longer for stuff to get there. It slows down the entire supply chain, but it doesn't completely blow it up. It just slows it. And if we have a nickel's worth of sense, which I admit is not a foregone conclusion.
Generous.
The whole slowing, we are providing to get by that way. Like from now, anybody who lives where I live, which is 8 miles from the Walmart, who wants to eat something has to go to Walmart. It's 8 miles. That's it. Okay. If we knew for sure that in 10 years we weren't going to be able to go that far, we could start this year. Somebody could go to the Walmart, fill up his whole station wagon, come halfway here and set it in the store, and everybody else could go there and get it. Okay. We could restore the existence of the subordinate distribution points that we used to have. That's what small towns existed. There were subordinate distribution points, and my grandfather was in Shelby, Iowa. On train day, he'd hook up a team of horses to a dray wagon, go down to the train station, pick up all the freight, go downtown and deliver it to all the storekeepers. That worked.
You know what I love about this is not only does that resolve a lot of the energy problems we have related to climate change and the fact that we're on if not peak, then at least finite, like fossil fuels are finite. But one of the big things that one of the big threads that runs through pretty much everybody that's sort of like tangentially related to Doomer Optimism or like our social circle, the people that we talk to every day on Twitter, et cetera, is this like passion for relocalizing things. Like I buy milk, cheese, honey from my neighbors because I want my money to stay here and I want them to have an incentive to keep producing because it becomes more resilient. And so like you said, as you slow down your donkeys from tractors, like your farm becomes larger. 28 acres goes from a very small farm to like way bigger than you can manage. And so like what that does is it also makes the world bigger, which is just a natural incentive to start relocalizing as much as you possibly can, which is magic, not only in terms of energy, but just in terms of society, because I live in rural Oregon, not that rural. I mean, we're a half an hour outside Portland, but it's pretty rural. I mean, my neighbor's a dairy farmer. I don't know most of my neighbors because everybody gets in their cars, drives out of their gravel drives onto the county road and is gone. I don't know any, but if we could only move at the speed of a horse, we would all know each other. We would all be supporting one another because we would have to. And that doesn't sound like, some people are like, that sounds like destruction. That sounds like a falling back. But to me, that sounds like building of like human connections that we're just missing now, and we're all filling in with, like, all of us are filling it in with being on Twitter a lot more than we would probably like to be if we had everything we wanted right where we are.
What you guys don't know that I know is that what happened to the localization was speed. When I was a little boy, when I was in the first place, they signed the Interstate Highway Act a month before my 9th birthday. Okay. So when I was a little boy, we used to go from Kansas City to Council Bluffs to visit my grandparents. And there was a little town every 10 miles, and they were all live. You go into a little town, the square was packed with people. It's Saturday and everybody's in town. All the little towns were live. All the little farms were alive. Missouri was covered with 40 to 160 acre farms when I was 12. And I can remember it. Everything was local when I was 12. What happened? Cars and tractors. Nobody knows what happened to the localization, but what happened to it was speed. When the cars and tractors got here, there was one group of people who was so dependent on their isolated society that they said, if we take this fast stuff, it will ruin our society. We won't have it anymore. And now today, all you have to do is look around. There is one community which operates locally everywhere in the entire United States that it exists, and that's the Amish. And that's because they're horse-drawn. They can't go fast. And if you can't go fast, you don't go fast. And if you can't go fast, you can't go far. So if what happened to localism was speed, and that's a fact. I watched it happen. And if we ever want localism back, we have to slow down. All the people who are talking about we need to find a way to relocalize, there's no reason to relocalize, except a hypothetical philosophical reason that I would like it better if my life was local. Okay, that's a reason, but it doesn't have any outcome. It doesn't drive anything. You know, if I need hardwood lumber, I'm going to go out here, I'm going to get in my car, and I'm going to drive 50 miles to Shooty Lumber in Kansas City. Because there's no way to get hardwood lumber out here. No way. Okay? If we lived in a community where Kansas City wasn't an hour away, it was 3 days away, we'd figure out a way to get hardwood lumber out here. We just figured it out.
Jeff, I think this is an absolutely perfect place to segue. We talked for an hour and 15 minutes about how you got to where you are right now, and a bunch of the problems that we all kind of see, the cracks in the system that we see. But what I really want to do before we hit our time limit is talk about what you want to build on the 40 acres. What are you doing? What are you doing there? And how is that a response to all of these things that we talked about?
Okay, my other 40, when I married Gloria, I turned my back on my other 40 and walked away. That'll be 18 years come September. In 18 years, nobody has done anything on that land. That means that whole 40 acres now is a grown-up mess of thorn trees and brambles and tangles and nothing you can use.
You mean an Edenic paradise, but devoid of human intervention.
Yeah, exactly. Also known as a horrendous mess, right? So what I want to do is I want to invite people to come live there if they will farm with donkeys. And I will provide the land at no cost to them. I will provide machinery support at no cost to them, because when you start out, it takes
you'll teach them.
Right. But it's a learning curve. You know, it's a long learning curve, because it's not only how to work the animals, it's how to get this job done with that less concentrated energy source. Because what we do is we apply energy to matter to do work. Anyway, what I'm trying to do over there is I'm trying to create about a 5 or 6 family community, like a little Amish community, only without the religious trappings, without the necessarily the garment specific trappings or any of that, but to focus on the low energy, low speed. See, the Amish don't do it for environmental reasons. The Amish do it for community reasons. Well, we've lost both our communities and the environment. If we want to build back the environment, we need to build back our communities and vice versa. And all of it can only happen if we do it at the speed of life and not at the speed of concentrated energy. And that means farming with animals. So I have put up this offer. I've got people I'm talking to now. And so far I don't have any who have accepted it. But I have put up this offer where I will create and finance an animal-powered farming community on 40 acres that I own. And if I'm able to do it, that will be my life's work for the years that I have left. And if I'm unable to do it, I will at least be able to say that I have tried.
That one thing you said sounded very tweet-worthy. Hope doesn't mean that it cheapens it. If we want to build back the environment, we have to build back our communities at the speed of life, and vice versa. Or this beautiful quote. We can the audience can look at like how to find you, your Twitter handle if they're interested in talking to you about this offer. There is one other thing that I want to talk to you about, and a lot of people who want to get off fossil fuels, I think they're not really thinking about the localism aspect, but they're like, well, we need to switch over to solar panels and wind turbines. And you've talked really eloquently about your critique of this kind of massive transition, multi-trillions of dollars of new infrastructure being built, all of that embodied energy going into that. Do you want to riff on that a little bit? Talk about that.
At the most fundamental point and the most critical thing about it is that every wind turbine and every solar panel that goes up takes away from spaces on Earth that could be alive. Every single wind turbine out there is standing on a block of concrete that a wise farmer could feed a family on that much ground. And I'm not exaggerating. So that's all death. Every time we put one up, we have to build more concrete, we have to dig more holes, we have to pave more roads to haul them back there. The Americans have no comprehension of the energy required to make anything. And that's why people think this is all possible. They think they can just snap a finger and it'll happen. They think that it won't take any energy. I'm going to give you an example. Have you ever seen a cotton candy machine?
Yes.
Okay, you pour cotton in the top and it heats it up and it melts it and it spins and the stuff comes out in fibers and then you put it on a stick.
Oh shit! I thought cotton candy was made of sugar.
Yeah, what did I say?
You said cotton.
You put in sugar, right? Okay, that's exactly how fiberglass is made. Except the machine that makes the fiberglass is about the size of a 4-family apartment building. What they put in instead of sugar is they put in a semi-trailer truckload of glass balls 1.5 inches in diameter. They heat it to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit and they spin it and the glass flies out in fibers and cools in the air and they capture it. And that's what they make wind turbine blades out of. People have no comprehension of the energy demands of what they want. I've been in a fiberglass factory. I put a paging system in a fiberglass factory. When people say, hell, I've got a picture. It's Owens Corning Fiberglass Factory in Fairfax, Missouri. I mean, it's all fires and blazes and sparkling glass on your skin and in your teeth, and it's just hell. That's step one. That's the first step of making a wind turbine. You got to do the same thing to make a solar panel. You have to melt sand into liquid, 2,700 degrees. And then you have to dip a crystal in it to make a crystal, and that's going to be your crystal. And then you have to saw that into wafers with a diamond saw blade. People have no comprehension of the energy outputs and throughputs they envision. They just think you can flip a switch and we don't have all this fossil fuel stuff anymore.
And what one thing there that always hangs me up is, think about the energy required to heat the glass to 3,500 degrees, or the energy required to actually make the solar panel. That's why you've got these pictures, these aerial pictures of just this massive devastation in China, where they're building new coal plants in order to build solar panels to send over to America so that we can have our green buildings.
Right. Right. It's all a lie. People don't understand the laws of thermodynamics. Energy is everything, and all of what we do, the tons. I mean, the energy of one, just a steel post that a wind turbine stands on. There's more energy in that thing than, people are going to go around and turn off their 100-watt light bulbs so they can save electricity, and then they want somebody to build a wind turbine. All 100-watt light bulbs I've ever turned on in my whole life put together couldn't build the leg that thing's standing on. Nobody has any idea the energy demand of what they want. And then you got the resource demand. We've got to mine all the steel. We've got to, the fiberglass is made out of sand. The plastic that the fiberglass is encased in is made out of petroleum. That's a giant energy process. What we need to do is make peace with food energy. Up until my grandfather was 40 years old, virtually everything that happened in the United States was powered by food. All the freight, all the transportation, all the colleges, all the universities, everything but the trains was powered by food. And the way you do that is you limit speed, distance, mass, and you limit energy. We can't have all this crap, because all this crap that we have now is made by wasting energy. From the mining stage to the manufacturing stage to the shipping stage to the retailing stage to the consumer stage to its final home in a landfill someplace, it's all powered by high energy.
So not only this is something that I see as like a constant through thread in basically everything you write, Jeff, and also a lot of what Jason writes, which is what's originally drew me to both of you, is that not only can we not, or should we not, but the question is, like, when you talk about this to a lot of people, including me, say 3 years ago, my response would have been, but that's how we get all of the glories of civilization. That's how we get all of the things that are driving us forward and, up into the stars and all of that. And all I can think about when I hear that now is that when I look at the life you're living, and when you talk about working with your donkeys and changing your pace to a foot pace and putting trees in the ground, or when Jason talks about, his, self-deprecating, like his homestead life, like what if the collapse never happens, and what if this was all for nothing? And the answer is, then you've just lived a beautiful life.
I won. That's the answer. I won, because I'm massively brain damaged. Okay. I have a hole the size of a walnut in the left side of my brain from a mortar round that exploded when I was standing in a bunker in Vietnam in 1968. And my whole left side of my body is full of shrapnel, and I have a hole in my brain. And so I'm foul-tempered. And you've seen it, I'm sure, Dave, but on occasion on Twitter, because it gets away from me. When I get really down, I just go up here and I hook up my donkeys and I go out at a walking pace. They're helping me willingly. They're affectionate. My land is beautiful. I walk out there. I have no noise. I don't have to put up with any racket, no engine noises, no nothing. You've seen my videos. All my videos are just filled with birdsong. That's the background noise of my life, birdsong. Okay. And exactly, if nothing ever falls down, I won anyway, because I had the best life of anybody. I had the best life of anybody. I've never needed much money. I've got more money now than I need. I can't think of anything to spend it on. I just let it accumulate. I don't need it. I got my donkeys. I got my ground. And really bad days, I just go up there and hook up the donkeys. It's fun. It's pleasant. It's enjoyable. It's good company. It's rewarding. I can go out here and I can see things that I've planted that have grown, and it's rewarding and it's fulfilling. I can go out here and I can see water running in my creek in July when it didn't used to, and I have this giant sense of accomplishment. I helped that happen. Me and the world working together, we helped that happen. And all of it, I wouldn't trade this. I wouldn't trade what I've got for anything, because it's just too good. It's too much fun. It's too easy. People say, "Oh man, I couldn't work as hard as you." Shit, man, the hardest thing I do is sit in the house.
It's true.
And I haven't been a howling success, with anything, but it hasn't really hurt me. I've had a good life, and I still am. I haven't given up. The fact that she's gone is a sad thing, and it's a sad interval. But I haven't given up. I've still got work to do. If I can teach somebody how to drive a donkey, if I can teach somebody how to love a donkey, if I can teach somebody how to get a good day's work done without ever lighting a fire in a motor, then I've accomplished something that to me is valuable, and I've given them something. Doomer Optimism. Let's just run. That's all. I know our time's about up, but let's just riff on Doomer Optimism. What is Doomer Optimism? Okay, I feel reasonably certain that the main machine out there is going to break down one day, but I feel reasonably certain that if it does, I'll be fine. That's optimism. I got my girls. My girls will take me everywhere I need to go forever. I don't. The only thing bad about driving donkeys on the road is all the assholes with cars. If the gas stations all ran dry, I'd be in a hog heaven. It's easy.
But at that point, people would probably try to steal your donkeys.
Yeah, but what happened?
They wouldn't know how to work them.
It wouldn't matter anyway. Donkeys wouldn't go for them. They wouldn't go for them. They'll go for me because they trust me. That's how you make donkeys work for you. You make them trust you. You make them know you're never going to hurt them. You're never going to ask them to do anything that hurts them. Mm-hmm. They have to trust you. Somebody else could walk up to my donkeys right now. A friend of mine, while my wife was dying, a close friend who's an equine professional and who I got my donkeys from, came over here to hook them up and drive them one day because I wasn't able to get out and they needed the exercise. And even for her, they weren't very well mannered. Mm. Because they're my donkeys. They know me. They trust me. Somebody walk up there and take my lines away from me and push me in a cart and say, "Get up," and then nothing had happened. Donkeys just stand there. But I can say, "Step up one step," and not even have the lines in my hand. They'll step up a step. They know. They're my friends. We're in this together.
Well, Jeff, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to say to the audience, or something that you wished we had asked you? I want to kind of give you the kind of the final word and platform. If there's anything, any final message.
Slow down. You can drive slower than everybody else. They won't run over you. I've been doing it for 40 years. Slow down. Drive 5 miles an hour under the speed limit everywhere you go forever. By yourself, you can come to slow down.
Jeff, I gotta say, one, thank you for taking the time. Two, you have dramatically changed the way I think about a number of things. I did go from driving 10 or 15 over to 5 under after one of your threads. It convinced me. Like, not just here, but like here, that it's actually a good thing to do. And my wife drives her crazy a little bit sometimes when people are buzzing by us, but I sit there and I use it as a meditation. Like I take all of their anger and just absorb, like just let it wash over me and not affect me. And it's been beautiful. So thank you for that.
Plus, you can just look out in front of you and there's nobody there.
You don't have to worry about going around people or like whether you're going to make that light, because guess what? It doesn't matter.
I drove around on empty roads all my life. There's nobody there. Occasionally they go whoosh, but they're gone. You know, you guys, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. It's been good, and you're both